Good morning, everybody. I am super excited because the amazing Brandon Bays has started joining us.
The journey is a method that can take you inside your body to specific cellular locations to open up with what's stored inside your body, the old stored consciousness, the cell memories, and go through a deep and radical process of release and letting go, ultimately understanding what's taken place in your life and coming to a place of forgiveness so that when new cells are born, they're born devoid of that old consciousness as new regenerative cells. And this is important work to undergo to get to the emotional root cause of what has put our surface blocks, our surface fears, our surface anxieties, our grief, our loss in place. And when you clear it out at that deepest level, then what happens is your being rests in a simple place of peace.
The universe wants you to heal. The universe wants you to heal. It's its deepest desire for you to be whole and happy and vibrant and well and living the best version of yourself. And so these opportunities that pop up like now, where you are brought to a point where you go, what am I going to do, are really opportunities for you to just accelerate that process. Good morning, everybody. I am super excited because the amazing Brandon Bays has started joining us as a regular on Thrive. And so I would love to welcome her today. Brandon, how are you doing?
I am doing so well, and I'm thrilled that we're getting this chance yet again to open with what's going on for all of us and to share how we can thrive even during this very, very uncertain time. And so it feels like powerful invitation to all of us to use this time to really invest in ourselves and make the most of what's here, even if we're living in uncertainty. So it feels a wonderful chance to meet with everybody.
It's such a wonderful opportunity to meet with everybody, and especially in this time of such uncertainty, to have these conversations that can really assist people in moving through this with more ease and feeling more supported. And that is one of the huge reasons why I'm so thrilled to have you be a part of this, because I know the work that you do is just so profound. And I know that your story is long and beautiful, but perhaps for the ones who are joining that have never met beautiful Brandon Bays, would you like to do a little recap of it just so that they understand why contextually this would be such a great opportunity to stay and listen?
Yes, very quickly. About 26 years ago, I was diagnosed with a basketball-sized tumor, and part of the gift of healing from that tumor is I found a method for all of us to go on our own healing journeys and get to something that are called cell memories. And what we all know about emotions and ourselves is that when you feel a strong emotion and you repress it, it releases a biochemistry into the bloodstream, which will go to certain cell receptors and block them, rendering the cells incapable of communicating with the rest of the cells in the body. And if over time illness happens, it happens where the cells are blocked. And conversely, what we also know to be true is that when we feel our emotions very openly and freely, like a child, naturally, our cell receptors remain open. And so the journey is a method that can take you inside your body to specific cellular locations to open up with what's stored inside your body, the old stored consciousness, the cell memories, and go through a deep and radical process of release and letting go, ultimately understanding what's taken place in your life and coming to a place of forgiveness so that when new cells are born, they're born devoid of that old consciousness as new regenerative cells. And so over the last 26 years after the best-selling book, The Journey, birthed itself, and I've written 6 books now. I've been traveling all over the world. It's now this method is being used for emotional healing and physical healing in 39 countries. It's translated in 24 languages. And so it's just a privilege to bring to people this liberating and life-changing work. And during this time, Susana, where we're all of us in the unknown, and many of us have lost our jobs, many of us are fearful for our health, our livelihood, even who we are in the world, this is important work to undergo to get to the emotional root cause of what has put our surface blocks, our surface fears, our surface anxieties, our grief, our loss in place. And when you clear it out at that deepest level, then what happens is your being rests in a simple place of peace, in a simple feeling of being at home in your own skin, at feeling right and true to who you are. And so during this time, I'm always saying to people, it's a good time for you to go on your own journeys, to really inquire and get to the bottom of what's causing all the anxiety and clear it out so that you can come from a more natural place of feeling healthily open in your own divine potential.
And you know, Brandon, it's so important what you're saying, because so many of us are conditioned not to acknowledge our feelings and to hide our feelings away and not respect that we are feeling this way, but to override that with being polite or doing what is perceived as the right thing, you know, or what we have been programmed to think is the thing that has been asked of us. And that's what we are supposed to then do as we go on through life. I know I battle with that, you know, and I often need to really think about it. I'm going through one of those next level of clearings of growth again now, as I'm sure so many of you listening are. And I'd like to actually ask, I know that there are people logging in from all over the world. I know LA is logged in. I know that Durban is logged in. Where are you guys tuning in from? Let me know whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching the replay. It's always so great to know what countries are logging in and who is our global community. I also would love to know, give me a thumbs up if you've read the journey and if you understand this work, because Brandon has been so gracious and so generous and is actually giving away a copy of the journey to people, which I will put a link for you guys to be able to download. But going back to what I was saying, we are living in a time where we are needing to really face ourselves and really honor ourselves and look at the things that are not comfortable and not in equilibrium and balance within ourselves. And I know that's been coming up a lot for me and a lot for all of you listeners as well. Brandon, what is the process that you usually take when you're confronted with something like that, when one of those emotions come up?
It's so an interesting thing, Susana. I went through a series of catastrophes. And where, you know, first I got that life-threatening tumor, which I healed from in 6.5 weeks' time. And the next year, my house burned down. And the next year, my husband, who I believed to be the great love of my life, who we'd been together for 20 years, he left me for a much younger woman. And it was a year after all of that. I mean, I'd lost everything. I'd lost my job. I'd lost my livelihood. I'd lost everything. And
so you've been exactly where so many people are finding themselves now.
Exactly there. And in my case, I'd actually lost not only my livelihood and my ability to pay the rent, but I'd lost the man who I considered to be the great love of my life. And we couldn't afford to go to a lawyer to get the divorce. And so we just went to an arbitration person who facilitated this agreement that we had, that even though, we'd been together for over 20 years and normally you would split that in half, that I wasn't asking for half of everything. What I asked was just that because so much of my life had been spent I was a presenter for Tony Robbins. And so serving him and his organization, and also serving my husband in his career. And very little of my own private practice was my source of income. That was sort of a side thing that I did. And my biggest focus was on serving my husband and serving Tony Robbins in getting his message out. And so we'd agreed that for 2 years, because I'd been married since I was 22, and by now I was coming up to my 41st birthday, that for 2 years I would get a modest monthly support payment, which would tide me over until I could build my private practice and, get word out there and work out there. So I was really in this place of having everything ripped away from me, and, starting up my own practice and counting on that support check. And one had come in the month before, and out of nowhere, here we are a month later, and, the check is meant to come in a week's time. And out of nowhere, I swear to God, I wasn't thinking anything. I was just vacuuming the floor, and boom, up came this fear. And when I talk about fear, it was almost like a panic attack. And I didn't know this, but I actually had fear of feeling fear. And so I went on the run, as you were mentioning earlier, where I went on the run and started to, clean the house madly, call friends, get new clients in. And I was constantly staying in motion because I was on the run from feeling fear.
Yeah.
3 days later, it came up again. And again, I got even more active and more in motion. And finally, it was a week later, and I was vacuuming that same place that I had vacuumed a week earlier. And this fear, no story around it, just out and out fear. It was the buried fear that I had been so good at pushing away, running from, denying, getting on with my life, sweeping it under a carpet. It was the buried fear that would not be ignored anymore. And it came up to a point where it was coming through me. It was almost like terror. And finally, I just looked down at the carpet that we had been vacuuming, and I thought, you know what? This carpet was vacuumed yesterday. I haven't even sat on the sofa. There can't be any dirt on this carpet.
Doing it again.
It's like, what am I running from?
Yeah.
And I turned the vacuum cleaner off, and I closed my eyes, and I asked myself, well, what am I so afraid of? And a picture of the spousal support check not coming in came in my mind. I thought, this is nuts. I mean, I've been through a tumor. My house has burned down. My cars have exploded. My husband's left me for another woman. I've lost my job, and now I'm afraid because one support check's not going to come in. And I got to I'm wondering if this is just a surface fear. And if there may be deeper fears that is at the core of this more surface fear. And so I did this experiment. I recognized that I had fear of feeling fear. And, people who are watching this, you might want to listen to this. And I have actually posted this process that I did online, so you can have the worksheets and actually undergo this worksheet, because it was so liberating for you. Is it okay with me if I share what I did?
Yes, please share it.
So anyway, I had closed my eyes, and I'd asked myself, okay, what am I so afraid of? And this picture of a spousal support check not coming in came up for me, and I thought, really? You're that afraid after all you've been through of a check not coming in? And I wrote it on top of a blank page. I wrote, well, what's the worst that could happen? Because I wanted to face, as you suggested earlier, it's an invitation from life to face all these things that we have been burying and pushing away. So anyway, I said, I wrote at the top of the page, what's the worst that could happen? And I closed my eyes and I made a picture that the worst that could happen was that the spousal support check didn't come in. And I said, okay, if that happened, then what would happen? And immediately this fear started coming up that in a month or two's time, I would run out of money and I wouldn't be able to pay my rent. And I started to panic at the thought that I can't pay my rent. And so I made a picture of that not being able to pay my rent. And how did that make me feel? And panic was rising. So I wrote at the other side of the page, how does that make me feel? And I said, okay, let's say that does happen, that the check can't come in and you can't pay your rent. What's the worst that could happen? And even though I knew that my landlord, he cared for me, he was very fond of me, he would have to do it. He'd have to throw me out of that apartment that had been a lifeline ever since my house had burned down. And as I looked at that picture of being thrown out of my apartment, I was faced with feeling both a combination of extreme shame that at the age of 41 years old, with all my diplomas and accreditations, with all the work I'd done around the world with thousands and tens of thousands of people with Tony Robbins, that my landlord would chuck me out of the house, out of the apartment. Yeah. And I was faced with shame and terrible fear. And so I said, well, how does this picture make me feel? And I wrote down how it made me feel, shame and fear. And I asked the next question, well, if that happened, then what's the worst that could happen? And I thought, well, I'd have to go stay at someone's house. I made a picture of going to my mom's house, and I thought, no way, I am not doing that. And I put a cross through that. I'm not going to be a parasite to my mom at the age of 41 years old. And so I made a picture of going to stay with my best friend. And we have a saying in the United States that you wear out your welcome, that after a week or two, even with the best of will, kindly, they're going to want you to move out so they can have their life back,
Yeah.
And I saw that picture and knew that that was the reality of what would happen. And I felt both a sense of devastation, betrayal, that my best friend would eventually try to coax me out of the house. And I said, and so I wrote that down. What am I feeling? If this happened, what am I really feeling? And it was devastation and betrayal and just humiliation. And finally I said, okay, if that happened, if my best friend had to kind of shoo me out of the house, what's the worst that could happen? And I found myself on the streets of New York City, a picture of me as a beggar holding out a cup, trying to get quarters to pay for food. And I mean, with all of my education and background and experience in life and all the certifications, ultimately I said, well, what am I afraid of here? And my deepest fear was I haven't got what it takes to survive. That intrinsically, something inside of me doesn't have the same ability that other people do. And so I circled this worst fear. I got it. I'd gone to the rock bottom. Yeah. I'd hit the bottom of the barrel. What was the worst fear? And how does that make me feel? It makes me feel helpless and hopeless, because if I don't have what it takes to survive, I'm going to die. And when I said, well, what is the worst that could happen? And the realization, well, actually, I would end up dying there on the streets of New York City. And something started to crumble. And it began to feel like my form started getting formless. And I fell into a vast field of nothingness, into a field of black emptiness, of, when the form has fallen away, and this black emptiness started being permeated and saturated and suffused with a scintillating presence of light that was omnipresent and everywhere, fusing everything. And I thought, well, even if my body dies, something remains here. This that I am, that is part of the fabric of the whole universe, that is my soul, is still here. And I opened my eyes, and this presence was omnipresent. And I looked at the circled fear that I saw was my worst fear. And I thought, well, if I do a journey process and get to the root of that worst fear and clear it out completely, I turned this blank page over and I asked, okay, what's the best that could happen? Let's say I clear that worst fear, this worst fear that many of us are experiencing right now. What's the best that could happen? And I wrote that at the top of the page. And I said, the best that could happen is that I realize that that check ain't never coming in again. And guess what? It never did. And I get real, that I need to get to the meditation center that I attend every week tomorrow and see if I can find a roommate to share this 2-bedroom flat with me so that I can cut my bills in half, And so an action plan started to unfold. And I said, okay, well, if I did that, let's say tomorrow I go to the meditation center and I do get a roommate into this house and we split the bills in half. Well, what's the best that could happen? Well, it would buy me time. It would buy me the time I needed to get my own life in order and start finally admitting to my friends this extraordinary work that was born from my own experience, from healing from a tumor. I hadn't been willing to share it up to that point. And I thought the best that could happen is I start calling my friends who are in the seminar business and tell them that this amazing work of cellular healing and awakening called The Journey has birthed itself through me, and then offer to do journey workshops in their homes. And I said, well, if that happened, then what's the best that could happen? Well, the best that could happen is I start giving these seminars and people experience radical awakening to themselves. And they experience this life-changing healing work and they heal, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally on all levels of being. And if that happened, then what would happen? Well, eventually the seminars would get bigger and more people would be participating in their own healing journey. And if that happened, then what would happen? Well, books would get written. If that happened, then what would happen? Then it would start going around to countries where they can't even afford this, like where people in Africa and a man in China and people all over the world would get this healing work. And if that happened, then what would happen? Well, it would start being on television and newspapers and radio shows, and people would become aware, and there would become a wave of awakening sweeping our planet. And I looked at that list of all the best that could happen if I was willing to face down and clear my worst fear. And I thought, does that give me the leverage I need to face down and clear that worst fear? And I went, damn right it does. So I ended up doing a journey process, got to the bottom of this terrible fear that I have not got what it takes to survive. I finished with that. The next day I got a roommate. The next day I started calling my friends in the seminar business. Within a month's time, I had at least 2 seminars every month. And then it ended up getting into newspapers. And then there was this big 2-page article written in the Sunday Times in Britain, where in Britain, and I've been doing this for a year, traveling, it just as an overnight sensation. And we had 2,500 calls for people wanting to undergo journey work in that first week. And I was doing back-to-back journey intensives. And then more newspapers got hold of it, and magazines and television shows. And then the book was written, and everything that I had written down as a possibility ended up taking place. And now the journey is being used by medical doctors and in hospitals. I mean, I did a whole journey outreach program there in South Africa where we had 38 medical doctors who were working with addiction. And they were able to undergo the whole journey practitioner program and then use this work to get to the emotional corollary of what was causing people to reach for their drugs. All because I found the courage to face down and clear my worst fear.
Yeah.
And so this is what I meant by, at the beginning, by saying that to use this time wisely and well, that your emotions are not going to stay buried.
Yeah.
This time is triggering all of us, and they're coming up, and yet none of us were given a manual. What do you do when all of this fear comes up, And now there is a method. And I just want you to know that we've been on our Facebook fan page and our personal pages. Every day we've been posting a video with different work that you can undergo. And I did post one a few days ago on facing your worst fears. And you can actually download the process sheets that I have just
Amazing.
spoken about.
Yeah, amazing. No, I'll get that link, and I'll definitely share it with everyone. A lot of people are saying so powerful, blown away, so grateful. I'm so glad that you are all tuned in for this. It's so interesting to me, Brandon, that we're moving from this fourth dimensional to this fifth dimensional reality. It's really coming into being at the moment. But my invitation to everyone listening, because the reality is that the universe wants you to heal. The universe wants you to heal. It's its deepest desire for you to be whole and happy and vibrant and well and living the best version of yourself. And so these opportunities that pop up like now, where you are brought to a point where you go, what am I going to do, are really opportunities for you to just accelerate that process. And I loved what you said. What is the worst thing that can happen? What is the best thing that can happen? But the reality is, whether you are in a situation right now listening and you're at a place where you're going, I don't know what to do next, I'm so stuck, my career is over, or whether you're at a place where you're going, okay, I need to readjust the way I work and the way that I do things, because that's also a lot of people that are listening. Or whether you are thriving, there are always these opportunities to grow and shift in different ways. It doesn't have to be dire straits. Sometimes if you don't listen for long enough, the universe, like when I got sick, the same thing happened, Brandon. It took me to a point, are you not listening? Okay, I'm just going to stop you in your tracks so that you pay attention, But the invitation,
it's like life sent an anvil at your head.
Yeah,
wake up.
Hello, I've been trying to tell you for ages. Can you please pay attention? But the reality is that these messages, these opportunities, these invitations are coming to us the whole time. And if we can actually take the time to stop and take a breath and face your fear, like you say, and go, okay, this is the reality, but what if? What if? And look at all of those realities and then reach out, realize that we are creators, we are resourceful. That's the point of us being here, is to experience ourselves, and what we are capable of. There are incredible resources like yours, and I definitely will share that with everyone. So face your fear. What is the worst that can happen? What is the best that can happen? And what is the one thing you could do today? All of you, what is the one thing you could do today, right now, to just make one of those shifts? I really love that, Brandon. Really, really fantastic.
Amazing. Because I think what's holding people back, as you said, that although I'm becoming aware that isn't this your howling time?
Yes, it is. Oh my goodness, it's 1 minute too. This is my howling time. So everybody, at 11 o'clock a.m., which is GMT +2 in South Africa, the most people are awake in the whole world. And so I know you all do it in different countries at your times at 7 or 8 p.m. And you thank the workers, the people that are essential to keeping this world going, our lives going, our food, our rubbish, our deliveries, everything. And so I always encourage you all to do it at 11 a.m. as well. So 1, 2, 3. Thank thank you. So that is my daily ritual. And I know that we've got essential workers that do tune in and watch this, and I've gotten a number of thank yous, but I hope that everybody is embracing this little bit of craziness that makes people laugh and just has this moment of joy. Now, I know we usually go into meditation at this point, but I really want to finish this conversation with Brandon. So I hope you guys will all forgive me because I am going to continue with Brandon. Brandon, so you've needed to also reinvent, relook at the way you have done all of your processes up until now.
Yeah, it's this time has been almost like a time of incubation. And it's interesting because I came back from India on March 11th, and I was having a journey seminar in some European country every week until July 11th. So all of those seminars got canceled, all the hotels, all the people's monies that they booked. The whole thing was just stopped. And I didn't know how long it would be stopped for. And my thought is, I can't stop offering this life-changing work. I mean, and even though I had been live streaming since 2011 when it first came out, when it came to my in-depth immersions, the seminars, the retreats that I give in person, that was not something that I was willing to even look at offering online, because it's, when you're together in a group and there's a collective and you're cross-processing, and it's a very deep immersion. And so even when I left Australia prior to India, I had said to, my friend, well, regardless of what happens, this, I won't be able to give the journey intensive, which is our foundational, kind of roll up your sleeves, dive in retreat. And when I got here to Greece, we immediately went into lockdown. All borders were closed, can't get in, can't get out, can't do anything. And, I had to open with, first of all, that I wanted to serve life. So we've shot over 43 videos that we've been offering to the world on, life-changing work that you can undergo in your own home, and interviews like this and summits that I've done, and et cetera. But I thought I need to open with the possibility that somehow I can get the same depth, the same quality, the same presence, the same results with an online version of the Journey Intensive, which is a 2-day, 9 until 6:30 program when it's done live with me in person. And so I began recording, and we've been researching like crazy different platforms, and because you need to be able not only to pair people up and for them to do journey processes live in person, but for them to choose their own partners, they need to be able to share. But because most platforms don't allow over 100, and we do have more than 100 when we give our seminars, then how do we find, ways to do this so that there can be live portions, there can be portions where I'm working with you, taking you into process work and meditations, processes where you're getting teaching, processes where you're working together, and yet all of it virtually. And I was really kind of had to let go what I thought was possible. I didn't think this was possible. And yet, once the final recordings had happened, and I realized we had to enlist other co-presenters, and I would have to have many trainers online to work privately with these people. Once we created the whole product, I was blown away by the possibility. And my husband then said to me, well, you need to keep opening even deeper, Brandon, because they're going to need to go on then to the more advanced level retreats. And it was like, no, I'm willing to start getting the work out there, but eventually it will be in person and la, la, la. And again, I had to break through in myself. And it's been a continuous process of breaking through what is possible. And what he says to me every day is, Brandon, let go of your notion of how the journey intensive, how the journey programs should go. Just let go of having ever known about how a seminar should be run, even though you've done it for 26 years. You've got to fall into the unknown and let a whole new animal birth itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's happening right now, is that a whole new, but it's scary.
Of course, it's always scary, but it is. I mean, you speak about it so often, and I know in my work as well, surrender is so key. Surrender, so accepting what is as it is, and then still just doing your best and just being open to the outcome, because the reality is we can't control the outcome. But often, if we surrender, if we just move forward with that trust, the outcome is so much greater than what we could have even conceived possible.
That is exactly true. That is exactly what happened to me. I had to face my worst fears about the possibility, if it could happen, if the depth could be there, and just fall in and surrender to what is. And let an incubation period happen, because we've been in lockdown for over 8 weeks now. It's we're 8.5 weeks of lockdown, like quarantine, police enforced lockdown, and so it's been a time of everyday surrendering. Oh,
I am with you.
Rigid control, my rigid idea of how things are supposed to be done, and falling into grace and letting grace, the divine potential that exists in all of us, give rise to a new way forward. And there's never a knowing what that is and how that's going to look and how it's going to unfold. And so each moment is fresh. It's not known. It's a surrender even in the development as it's happening. And new ways forward. Our whole company is changing. And that means all of our employees are having to get on board with this new, and all the different offices around the world. And all of a sudden, it's like, whoa, the whole paradigm of the way we have done business has had to move with the times. And it's taking our employees, not just me, in the creation and the keep surrendering to how it's all unfolding, but all of my employees to do the same. And it's terrifying to them because they've had set ways of doing things. They've had, the formula, this is how you respond to that. And suddenly we've had to break all the molds.
Yeah.
We've had to break through all of our control, all of our set ways. And together, we open into this infinite intelligence, and it's like a cauldron of the unknown. And in that, together, we are birthing the whole new way our company is moving, and not just content-wise, seminar-wise, but as a company that has now moved from an in-person company to an online service. And that's a big undertaking.
It's a massive undertaking, but I do also feel, because Robin Banks as well, and Robin is a very good friend of mine, and he's never done a Mind Power online, like you've never done a journey online, and he just did his first one, and it was exceptional. More people than he's ever had in one room to do a Mind Power were able to tune in and be a part of this. And so I do feel like it's this opportunity, although it's this growth process, that it's this opportunity, and you're going to end up serving so many more people through this process.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm so excited. I was supposed to do your journey intensive in June, because you were coming here in June, and obviously the flights are cancelled and everything. But you will be doing. When is your first? Have you got dates yet for your first online journey?
In the very first program that I will give, it won't be until the autumn, and it will be South Africa is my very first program that I'm giving. And it will be in, I think, the first weekend of October that
Okay.
I'm giving the Journey Intensive live. And so there is an energy that happens with that. And so, I mean, let's say God allows, grace allows that flights are allowed to happen, that we're allowed to not only get to a country, but not have to self-quarantine for 2 weeks. Because if that's the case, I won't be able to come to South Africa. But, right now, it's right now booked in there. And so I'm praying that. And if not, then those people will be in any case allowed to take the money that they would have put onto that. They will put it onto the online version of the Journey Intensive. And then when I am allowed in the country, they'll be able to go take that as well. So they'll
be able to come visit.
Double their money's worth.
Well, that will be nice. So can you believe it's 11:11, which is my favorite time always. And we are wrapping up with Bran and Bez. It has been so special having you here. And for all of you that have been listening, I hope that you've gotten something out of this. I hope that you've understood that we are all in the same boat together, whether it's happening right now, whether you're listening live or whether you're listening to a recording of this. We live in an energetic world. And so this message is coming to you at the exact right time for you. So that's really important for me that you guys understand that. And I love the invitation that Brandon gave. And so I'm going to repeat it, is to really look at that fear, because so many of us are scared of just being scared and we don't even know what that fear is, but really looking at that fear and then going deeper into it. What could happen? What could happen? What could happen? Until you really hit the lowest, rockest bottom of your fear. And then go and look at the possibilities of what can happen and delve into those and invite those into your consciousness, because even just inviting those will start the process of expansion energetically. And then, of course, what can you do today? One thing that you can do today. And just remembering that you are resourceful beings. You are creators. You are going through a spiritual awakening. That's why we are here. We're going through this spiritual expansion in these human forms. And then I would really, really encourage you to dive onto Brandon's page. I will share the links with you guys. And she has so generously offered you all a copy of The Journey, the book, her famous book, absolutely free. And then, Brandon, I'll get a link from you for that process that you spoke about during our conversation today. And I'll share that with everybody as well.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I just pray that everyone there and who's watching thrives during this time where life is not going to be the same, but it's a wonder to think of how it could be.
Yes.
So a heartfelt namaste to everyone.
Namaste. Thank you so much for being with us. So lots of love, lots of light. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you found this very, very empowering. Bye for now.